Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 300 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack for Business truly is? Your hosts are Bernie Fransgrote from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You, Inc.
Today's topic is the missing piece to unlocking your growth. And, the question of the audience, how can I create authentic connections and emotional engagement with my audience to drive real business growth? Our guest today is Karl Pontau, a freelance content systems and strategy consultant. Karl is a super connector who loves to catalyze genuine human-to-human relationships. He uses his storytelling and content systems experience to accelerate growth by evoking the right emotions and in the right people at the right time. Karl is excited to create impactful marketing campaigns that connect people to build communities, innovative business development strategies that lead to growth, and opportunities for mentoring and supporting others in their professional journeys. And Karl, welcome. And I see that you've visited over 20 different countries and you've had some medical issues when you were 15 that would normally slow most people down. Welcome. Who's your favorite hero? And why is she your favorite hero?
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm really happy to be on the show. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I am here because of the support of other people, of the human connections that I've had throughout my life, the relationships and the people that have stepped up when I really needed it. As you alluded to, when I was 15, I had a couple brain tumors, and what got me through that was all the support from the medical staff and amazing medical team, but my community and family and friends really rose to the occasion and made the experience a lot easier for me to get through. And it really taught me the importance of having these strong relationships because we don't achieve anything worthwhile on our own. And I think in general, in the world today, there's a lack of human-to-human connection. And so one of my heroes was a ton of amazing information on how to really build effective human connections is Brené Brown, and her whole focus on the importance of vulnerability and overcoming shame that a lot of people feel about themselves, I think are two really important things that I've taken to heart. And I think that, and I've been seeing a lot of kind of trending predictions for 2025 in the business world, in the marketing space, that with the rapid adoption of AI and kind of over the ease of making mid-tier content, that and people kind of having this lack of human connection, that what's going to help businesses stand out and really attract the right people is the ability to build real relationships with individuals and not just spray and pray content out there, but really connect with the people you're trying to do business with on a human-to-human level and build understanding. And that's going to take relearning or learning a whole new set of skills for companies and leaders and their marketing teams and everyone, because unfortunately over the last decade or so, people have forgotten how to do that. And fortunately now businesses have realized, we need to fix this stuff because it makes our brands are really fragile and vulnerable to disruptions. But it's going to take a lot of work to reverse this trend.
What do you consider a content system, and how does it help business connect?
Yeah, so a lot of times companies they have an asset library, they have content that they're putting out into their marketing, but they're going about it in backwards. They're thinking about what we want to talk about, what we're excited about. And it's very much, like I said earlier, spray and pray. That's kind of putting it everywhere. They don't have a system or a strategy for reaching the right people and really connecting with them. And it starts with a fundamental misunderstanding of how human beings make decisions. Because as much as we like to think of ourselves as thinking beings that feel, we're very much feeling beings that occasionally think. And so if you're not evoking the right emotions in people and meeting them where they are and understanding them, you're not going to get their attention, especially today when there's so much vying for people's attention. So when companies are creating content, their system and their strategy needs to start with an understanding of their audience and how they're feeling at each step of the kind of buyer's journey or the relationship you're trying to build with them. Because if you aren't showing you understand them and aren't building the relationship the right way by showing you care about them and being vulnerable and open and understanding to who they are and helping them feel seen, they're not going to notice you. They're not going to care. They're not going to move to the next step. And then part of it is also not just having a bunch of content that your marketing team uses and a bunch of content that your sales team uses and a bunch of content that your like onboarding team uses, but having a consistent journey that the customer goes through as you're building the relationship from initial touch point to building trust and the relationship to asking for the sale to bringing them on board and making sure the entire thing is seamless and, again, addresses their emotions as they're going through the journey, because they're not going to go from initially meeting you to a sale in the same discussion. It's going to take multiple touch points, and you have to show that you're listening and you understand how they're feeling at each point, because companies are trying to rush through the sale, or they're trying to just, they focus on what they care about and they're not building relationships anymore. And people are sick of it and they're craving connection, craving a sense of belonging. And so the right content system is successful because it evokes the right emotions and the right people at the right time to bring them from just meeting and connecting all the way through. Okay, they're ready to buy, get them to buy, and then reward them and build that relationship over time. And you'll have not just another client or customer, but a person that becomes part of your community, who supports your brand, who advocates to their friends about how awesome you guys are. And that sort of buffer of supporters will stick with your business over all the like disruptive events that might happen, because it's not just another transaction to them. It is a relationship, and people want to protect and support groups and other entities that they feel like they belong to. And they're just not a sense of that. Even though the biggest, if you think like the biggest tech companies in the world or the biggest brands in the world, most of the time when you think of them, the emotional response you have is going to like ick, or there's no emotional response. It's like, whatever. And so like when there's a news about, they're thinking about antitrust stuff against Google, I was going to like, good, yeah, break them up. Who cares? They're probably too big anyway. But if you actually haven't cared about the company because of, you had a strong emotional response, like that you wanted to protect it because you felt like you belonged there, you'd be like, oh no, don't break it up. I love this thing. They have some sort of emotional response to it. So it's, companies have lost that brand relationship in going after just quarterly metrics and focusing on the bottom line all the time. And it's making them very fragile, and there's no real brand or customer loyalty for most of them, because people, it's a transactional relationship. They don't feel seen or cared about. And so there's, especially for companies that are trying to grow and scale, if you want to stand out in the marketing world, especially with all the AI templated blah crap going out there, showing your audience you care about them and actually understand and trying to build relationships is going to shine like a beacon in the fog of AI slop that's going to be churned out in the next decade.
I'm getting depressed.
The hope is, or the hopeful part is that it's fixable. Just you got to understand that you need to care about other people first, and you'll get what you want. You'll be able to grow, but you got to actually connect on a human to human level. And you'll benefit too, or your company benefits too, because you'll get the results you want actually faster than if you just keep trying to play the same game all these other companies have been doing for the last decade that's got us in this situation.
When you're doing storytelling, first off, what got you into storytelling as the key? What drew that particular area versus anything else you could have done?
I grew up hearing great stories from my dad. He's a really good storyteller, and I originally studied animation. When I saw the first Toy Story film, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta do that. That's so cool. And I realized as I was learning animation and submitting stuff to like competitions when I was in undergraduate school and seeing the audience's response to my story, and like audience, like 1,000 people in this auditorium. I knew maybe 10 people, but when everyone laughed at the joke, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to have this impact on other people and make their lives better through telling a story. And I realized by combining that with my desire to be a positive force in the world and help people solve real problems when it comes to stuff like healthcare, and because of the whole brain tumor experience, that storytelling and developing human connection is the way I can have the biggest positive impact. The best way to inspire people to change and to do something is through stories, because our brains are wired for storytelling, and we empathize with characters and stories. In fact, our brains can actually tell the difference between a story and reality. If you ever watch like a horror film and you see the hero being chased by the monster and your heart starts beating and you start sweating, you're having the same physical response as if you're being chased by a monster, because you care about the person who's going through it, but your brain can't tell the difference. And so if you're going to get people to gain the wisdom and understanding of something without having to go through the awful experience themselves, and the story is the best way to do it. And so I love helping organizations that are working to improve patient care or develop new treatments and procedures for stuff like cancer, leukemia, also awful diseases, because I saw how important it is to have good treatments. From what I experienced, like I had chemo and radiation, and yeah, they work, but they still are terrible. And so if I can help companies that are developing new procedures and treatments and solutions to make cancer less of a debilitating diagnosis, then that's really a life well spent. And I think a lot of these companies have great opportunities to make an impact, but they struggle to tell their story well. They struggle to communicate and connect with people because they get so wrapped up in what they like about the science or the tech, and they fail to understand that their audience doesn't understand or care about it the same way. And so you have to reframe that message to show you understand what their problems are, what they really care about, and then tell your story in the way that's going to inspire them to act. And so I've learned how to do that really well, and I'm able to help companies like Innovix, a well-funded battery startup that was spending like 45 minutes of every hour-long sales meeting trying to explain their tech to other battery engineers, reframe the messaging in a 2-minute animation, and they used that, posted that on their website, and they're using that. A couple of weeks later, announced a SPAC, and their valuation jumped to $1.13 billion, and they got a $250 million contract with the U.S. Army to make batteries for all the wearable tech that soldiers use. And it's, if you focus on what your audience cares about first, show you get them, then that opens a tons of doors, and it's something that most companies aren't good at.
You mentioned two elements here. You talked about your dad. That's an oral story. So he's telling you a story. But you've also mentioned animations. And in fact, you just mentioned the animations with the battery company. How do you get the right story? So whether it's animation, video, image, dynamic image, and then the story, how do you merge those two to get that good story? Because you can take a film, and I've seen a film where the voice is not synced with the actor, and going, oh my gosh. Or it's one of those subtitled ones where you see the mouth moving, go get him. And then the mouth moves again. I got him. It becomes a comedy sketch as opposed to serious drama. How do you make that all come together?
So the process is, for any of those sorts of content creation where you're trying to reach an audience and inspire them to follow a call to action, understanding where they're at, how they're feeling, what they care about, and reframing your message so that it's going to grab their attention first by showing you understand them, and then explaining how what you want them to do is going to help them and the value you're going to bring to them, and the better their life is going to be by taking this next step. And your story needs to relate to them, and so you have to, going to show you understand them, and then it's about building up the anticipation and the kind of emotional journey that you need them to go through over the course of the story. So then when you suggest a next step, they go, oh my gosh, this is a no-brainer. I got to go do this. That's really inspiring. But it has to be an emotional appeal because, well, we make decisions with emotion and justify them later with logic and reason. And so if you don't have the emotional appeal and just throw a bunch of facts and data at them, they're not going to take action because you're not speaking to the right part of the brain. So it's really about showing, understanding the emotions they're feeling now and helping them understand and showing how what you want them to do will get them to how they want to feel, and making it really easy and breaking it down into smaller steps so that it's less scary and reassuring that they can make the actions you want them to make, and it's not going to cause more problems than it solves. And it's a really complicated process to move people through this journey effectively. And a lot of businesses, I think I mentioned earlier, like they're trying to jump right from just connecting with someone to, okay, now buy from me. And it takes time to build these relationships. And so the fastest way to speed up your growth and to close more deals is to actually slow down and take the time to build real relationships with people, because then when you actually do ask them to commit, they'll be ready for it because you're connecting on a human to human level, and there's just not enough of that in the world.
Do you find that some vice president hears something about storytelling, so they get all on the bandwagon and they try to implement something and don't have a clue and make obvious, brilliant mistakes that you could have spot in a heartbeat?
Yes. There's a lot of times that companies bring in a consultant to work or do like a seminar or something, is that during the actual event, people get really hyped up and they're excited and they're energized. And then they go back into the office, and the weekend happens and they go back to work on Monday and they just revert back to their old behaviors because they've built up habits, and the real change or impact doesn't happen in the organization because it takes a lot more effort than just one seminar, one coaching session to really change behavior. And so if a VP gets really excited about, we're going to tell more storytelling in our marketing, and they go to one workshop or get one like symposium sort of thing and then go, we're going to make all these sweeping changes to the way we're doing things, and all their team members and their department is like, what is blindsided by it, that's not going to move the needle much at all. And so when I'm working with people, the first month or so at least is just starting by talking with their teams, talking with their audience, talking with the stakeholders, and just getting to know the people that actually need to implement the change and make the updates, not just getting the leadership on board, but getting all the people whose daily routines and the tools they use and the way they go about doing their work are going to be impacted, and getting to understand them and how they feel about this and what their preferences are, so that when you go to implement a content system, the actual employees who need to be using the tools and applying the stories and creating the stories are on board and aren't digging their heels in and resisting change. And so you start by obviously getting the decision makers on board, but the real implementation process starts with, again, listening and understanding what the real problems are that's keeping this sort of change from happening already, and then addressing those real problems instead of just making a sweeping declaration that, hey, we're doing this now. Here's what the top-down directive that you have to follow, or else. That never works.
When a company, let's say you're starting, you're a startup and you're trying to create a story, there obviously is an origin story to work with. How do they bring that to bear? How do they make that effectively bring it to the audience? The resources may not be there to hire an animator or a film crew, et cetera, because when you're talking about larger corporations, yeah, they have some resources. They have the resources or funds to do that. how does someone or a mom and pop shop, they have a story, they have a really good story, and if it gets out there, bonus. How do they craft that? How would you recommend them craft that?
That's a great question. Yeah, and fortunately, there's a lot of the kind of requirements to create content or the technology needed just in people's pockets already with your phone, like an iPhone or like a Android phone. The camera, the microphone, and everything is way better quality than what most companies have used for the last ever since cameras were invented. And and especially if you're at like the startup level or you're a local kind of like small business owner, people are often going to want to connect with you because you're the one talking with your clients, you're working directly with them. And so if you're telling your story, you don't need to have a huge film set with professional cameras and lighting and hair and makeup. If you show up as yourself, just like in a selfie, having your partner or spouse holding the phone and just talking about your human experience and why you care about the work you're doing and why you want to help the sort of clients you want to work with, and share some genuine human experiences, that's going to resonate way more than any overly polished, professionally produced video. The people that it sets up the expectation for the experience people are going to get when working with you is they're going to be connected with a real person who understands their feelings and their fears and their struggles, and you have the tools and the desire to help them get what they want. And that is a breath of fresh air from what they hear from most of your competition or even like the bigger companies that you might be competing against, because people are tired of feeling like a number or just like a prospect to sell to. They want to connect with someone who understands them. As if you have a great story about why you started your business and you can show up on camera and talk as yourself. And it's okay if you stumble or have some ums and uhs or just a little bit, you're not super polished, because humans aren't super polished. We're messy. We're really messy. And so you don't have to be perfect on camera to appeal to people. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it'll be more appealing to them if you do show some flaws and some things that they can relate to, because that'll just, again, build these relationships that people are craving.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind as you're talking about the story, imparting the story to the audience. And again, depending on the medium. Obviously, if you're doing it in person, that's one thing. And if you're recording it, it's another. Do you have to become an actor or someone who's been trained in theater or someone that's on stage? There are different rock bands, depending what your flavor of taste is. That are large groups or a large performance, perhaps like a Taylor Swift. They've practiced at it, but they've had people likely coaching them along the way, I suspect, but how to present, what to wear, approach. Is that something that might be too daunting for some people? Or, you know what, just write down a story, kind of craft, work with somebody? What's the best way to evolve your story so it gets out intact?
Yes, I think it depends on the individual. I know, because no, people are very different. So some people are more naturally comfortable on camera and more outspoken and able to orate in a way that is effective for business.
Mhm.
For people that do need help with public speaking or something like that, Toastmasters is a great group to join to get better at speaking in front of groups or in front of a camera and how to organize your thoughts and present verbal messages effectively, whether it's recording or live in front of people. And then there are plenty of coaches or tips for how to craft your story and how to present it well, so you're coming across in the way and the way people perceive you, that's the real important thing to understand, especially your audience you're trying to relate to. The people you're not trying to work with, you don't really care how they perceive you, but your target audience, the people you're trying to bring in as your clients or customers or what have you, you need to understand how they're going to perceive how you show up on camera or in front of them. And so there are people, resources for getting better at that if you're trying to communicate your story on camera.
So, what's the first step they should be doing then? Like, what should they map out if to build out that storyline?
So the best exercise they can take, or kind of to start off this whole process, is something that was actually developed by Toyota years ago called the 5 Whys exercise, which is you start with a statement or a claim, and or a question like, why'd you start your business? And people answer with, because I enjoy doing X, Y, and Z. And then you ask yourself, so why do you enjoy doing X, Y, and Z? And then you repeat this process at least 5 times. And usually by the 5th, maybe 6th time, you'll reach a core truth about yourself and a core experience in your life that usually is something that happened when you're between 8 and 10 years old. And that core experience is something that set you on the path of your life today, because it's when our personalities and a lot of our beliefs are set about that age. And so there'll be some core thing you went through that is deeply human and universal for like people understand like that is a powerful moment. And the people you're trying to reach and connect with probably have had similar experiences or can resonate with that story. And so if you convey that message is that I'm doing this because here's what I went through that made me who I am, which is why I'm so good at doing this thing for people like you, that's going to resonate way more than I have this many years of experience. Or I've been like all the awards, no one really cares about that much. But the core message of here's why I do what I do and how it influences the experience you'll have when you work with me and how I'll get you better results because of the story I just told you, that is what gets people really excited and go, oh my gosh, not just they can help me, but they are going to understand me and I'm going to, we belong together because of this experience, the shared human experience. And that'll lead to not just another client, but a client that's going to be a lifelong client and somebody who's going to advocate for you and enjoy the experience of working with you because you're connecting with them on a much deeper level. And it takes vulnerability and it takes removing all the armor that we usually wear, especially in the business world, to tell those sorts of stories. And oftentimes it can be dark. Just strength of your character shows that the fullness of who you are as a person. And again, that is, people are craving that these days more than ever. That's what's going to move the needle.
You mentioned Brene Brown earlier and how totally refreshing she is. Do you find that it's getting through to corporations or it's pushing a cart up a hill for the rope or it's a journey? Where are you feeling that the corporation is listening?
So there have been a lot more. I was talking about a podcast that I recently launched called the Human Connection Podcast, where I talk with people that are experts in human connection. And one of them that I just recorded earlier this week, she runs events and she's like an event planner. And she's worked with a lot of companies that are doing more, instead of doing a survey online to try and understand their audience, they're hosting local events where their target audiences are living and working and going to meet them in person and have these more intimate conversations to understand who they are, because they're recognizing that the digital landscape is so crowded and clogged with generic templated AI driven content, that if you are going to stand out, you have to build relationships. And they're also realizing that they don't have brand relationships anymore. They have just transactional relationships with people. And so they found that, and there's also just more research that a result of the effectiveness of SEO and pay-per-click ads has been on the decline for the past few years. And so companies just aren't getting the results they had been getting from these broad-based, impersonal, spray and pray templated content anymore. And so that combination is waking companies up to the fact that they need to build relationships, because if there's more and more customer churn, or like turnover, people aren't staying with service providers as long as they used to. There's just all these issues with the way people interact with businesses that is stemming from a lack of human connection. So companies are finally waking up to that reality, and that's inspiring them to start to build these connections. It's going to take time, but it's something that is the solution to a lot of the underlying issues with the business world and society in general, in my opinion.
What's the most overlooked element of content systems that drives growth? People miss.
So the first bottleneck that people experience is they don't know how to understand or put themselves in their audience's shoes. They don't understand their audience as well as they think they do. They assume that, oh, our marketing funnel is this. They're going to see this ad, they're going to do this and this and this, because that makes sense logically. It's like, no, they're not buying because of logic. Like I said, they're buying because of emotion. So you got to understand how people are feeling about, not just, and especially like with more personalized stuff for B2B, if you're trying to get like the CFO and the CMO and the CIO and the CEO to make decisions, they all care about different things and have different things stressing them out. So if you're going to inspire them to even just pay attention to you, you got to focus your message on, hey, I understand as a CMO of this company, you're worried about this, or as a CFO, you care about this, and you're feeling like this right now. We get you. Let's like check out this thing. Or what's the next step? And the key thing about the content system is focusing the message on individuals and showing understand how they're feeling and having an emotional appeal that gets me to the next step, not to the sale right away, just to build a relationship. And then, okay, so you're building and you have an asset library that's, okay, we're trying to communicate with this person at this company. They're feeling like this at this stage of the relationship. Here's what we use for that situation. And then you can tweak use different assets for the same situation, but a different person. And you can customize it and make it so you show, hey, we get you. We understand how you are feeling right now. And most companies, their content and their messaging doesn't allow them to do that at all. And if you had the system set up correctly and you build the asset library beforehand, you can easily iterate and modulate and tweak stuff really quickly, and it's not very expensive, and you have high quality customized stuff. So you get like the good, fast, and cheap. You get all three of those over time. And that gets people to pay attention and to follow calls to action, because it's not just the same overly templated or things that focus on like the logical or the data or the science that that company that's sending it is really excited about, but the audience doesn't care about or even understand. It's changed that entire mindset of how you're going to reach people is the core first step and the foundation of a good content system. And so most companies are going about it in a backwards way, and they're throwing their content into the maelstrom of mediocre slop out there and wondering why no one's paying attention.
Karl, is there a way back to the campfire? You were talking about your father being a brilliant storyteller. Can you see a time and a way where we get back to that metaphor of the campfire? And so someone's telling a story that people are just enraptured by?
Yeah, I think that's something that is going on with more of these the companies that are doing more in-person events and smaller in-person events. And because if you're watching someone on stage telling a story or talking to you, and the only medium between your ears and their mouth is air, then that's what they're really saying. And there's a much deeper connection than if you're watching a video or reading something online that could have been AI deepfake, or could be like altered, or could be like not even that person saying it. So for companies that are looking to cut out some of the opportunities for deception or misinformation, these local in-person events could be basically like akin to the campfire, where someone who's trying to share ideas can connect with people in a more intimate setting and build that trust, because people know that, hey, it's coming out of their lips and hitting my ears directly. And so I think, yes, that's starting to happen more, which is really exciting. And I think there's the overall understanding that we need to connect more as in a human to human level for companies. And that's what's going to move the bottom line that they care so much about, is going to facilitate more of a change towards content that is personalized and focused on, at the core of how showing we understand people, and that requires actually understanding them and connecting with them. And when people prioritize that over just like because they get them the results they want, then that's going to be a practice that you can't just turn off when you go home from the office. You're going to be thinking about, how do I understand my friends or my family better? How do I understand my neighbors better? And if people build the skills of listening and empathy and understanding other people to make their business successful, that just makes them a better human being in general, and it's going to make society better, because we're listening to each other again. And we've forgotten how to do that because it's been so easy just to shout into the storm. But the storm's gotten so big that you can't hear anyone unless like they're really focused on on who you are.
When you're creating content, if you're a storyteller or you're a comedian, for example, you're on stage giving a presentation, you get to read the crowd. So you're getting almost a little biofeedback loop.
Oh yeah.
And eyes are lighting up, or their heads are dropping down, or whatever the case might be. How do you train yourself if you're doing a recording, for example, either doing a recording or even a short animation? How do you know that it's triggers? Now, usually when you write something yourself, it's perfect till such time you read it 3 days later, like an email, 3 days later going, gosh, I can't type, or I don't use the King's English too well, so to speak. How do you know that what you're about to push out is good before it hits the presses or gets cast out wide for everybody to see? What mechanisms do you do to do that sound check?
The idea of A/B testing is well established. And when you're doing a content system like that, before you put out a huge piece of like a video or a huge animation, you'll test bits of the message in just in text or smaller content and see what performs, what people are resonating with. And that can give you some good guidance on what's going to be worth focusing the rest of more of your bigger content pieces on. And it's something that as a company or as an individual doing more research on and having these discussions with focus groups in person where your audience is, and asking them the right questions and actively listening to what they're saying, they'll tell you what they're looking for. We want to help you. We want to know how you're feeling about this, what you care about. How can we best create solutions for this problem that you care so much about? We want to hear from you, and then actually hear about it and listen. That sort of research to understand your audience is essential. And again, unfortunately, the last decade or so, companies have been cutting that from the budgets. They think they can just skip getting to understand their audience, and that doesn't work, because when people can tell that you don't really understand or don't care about them, they immediately disengage and go somewhere else. Because there's so many options out there these days. There's so many people that are offering the same solution or similar solution that you are, that the best way to differentiate yourself is to show you're actually listening and care about people as a person and not just as a sale. That's just a breath of fresh air to consumers these days. And the way you can show you understand it is not necessarily just about what you're selling them, but just building a community of like-minded people around a product or an experience of using the product, like what Nike did with Run Club. They get people that are like running into groups, and they can help them run. And you don't have to necessarily be wearing Nike shoes when you're running, but you can just get together with other people that like running, and you go running, and you enjoy the act of running. And like I was thinking, someone else was on my show earlier this week, was talking about how they had someone initially sent a complaint to the CEO about the experience at Run Club. There was something he didn't like about it, but he kept going with Run Club, participating, and later on sent another letter a few weeks later saying, yeah, this has been great. I just bought like these Nike shoes because I love this Run Club experience. And it's like, they didn't keep pushing ads on them. They just like created the community of people that liked an activity that like could involve their product. And they eventually got a sale from this guy who now is also an advocate because of the shared experience of running with other humans. That's something you can apply to almost like any business when it comes, if you're selling a product or service, getting people around something that they all care about that is related to what you're doing, and just build a community of people that care about that thing and have them connect as human beings. And then they'll be the buffer and the marketing team that you would be paying out the nose for to try and do just through digital and social, all those things. And they'll do it happily, and they'll carry way more weight than anything you could say for yourself. Because I can tell you, as a marketer, someone you trust saying, hey, you should buy this thing because they're awesome, because I had this great experience, is going to carry way more weight than I could ever try to do to sell you my thing myself. That's just how our brains are wired. So if someone you trust is in your community, or someone who they trust in your community goes, oh my gosh, I love being part of this group. They do such cool stuff. The guy's a really cool product. You should check him out. Sold. And you did, and you build the community. You connect people on a human-to-human level, and your business thrives and is much more resilient, because those same people will forgive you if you have a blunder or there's an issue. But if it's just a transactional relationship, they're going to complain. They're going to argue on price. They're going to leave the first chance they get when something shiny is jingled at them, and you're going to be fighting annoying customers and churn, and you'll be pulling your hair out with all the stress. But if you connect with people on a human level, build a little tribe around your business, you'll be set. And companies have been neglecting that, and now they're starting to pay the price, and they're realizing, oh crap, we got to rebuild our communities again. And you got to start at a human-to-human level.
Carl, you started in an animation world, from what I understand.
Yep.
And I think of the most famous animation and storytelling combo for me is Aladdin. And you definitely have Robin Williams, who is a category all to himself. But what makes animation and storytelling work on a technical level that goes beyond just one man's talent?
So what really appealed to me about animation as a storytelling medium is that you can create any sort of visuals you want, as long as you have the time and the budget. You're not limited by physics or location and lighting and all those like permits and stuff. If you're trying to film something, there's a lot more hoops to get through to get like a filming site secured, and actors, and also just gravity and physics. Like animation, if you want to represent something with visuals, you can do it. And so it allows for stuff like Robin Williams' Genie and the Aladdin videos. Really good at connecting people like with other real humans and telling human stories. Animation especially shines when you're trying to communicate abstract or complex ideas that are hard to point a camera at, and you can illustrate and show the visuals that help anchor the ideas in people's heads. And then when they try to recall what they learned, they have an easier way to recall it because they have images involved rather than if you just say it to them.
So we've covered storytelling. I guess the attributes around a story is how you're attired, your expressions, the tonal, your voice, the content. Does music, does that another influencing
Oh, yeah.
factor? Do you recommend it? And then how do you strike that balance of getting the right thing? Obviously, if you're doing Aladdin, one that look very blue, maybe a little pear-shaped, and come out of a really skinny bottle, in which case, bang on. But you also have to put a bit of music in the background. It's almost like if you're into the movies, right? Except you're not doing a full length 60 to 120 minute long story per se, as they would. If you're watching, say, the movie Dune, that has a whole story, right?
Yeah.
And there's music that gets you to emotively. How do you construct it so that you have a tight package? Because usually you don't have 2 hours for somebody. You have a message and you're doing a marketing. How do you bring that whole package together so that everything is in sync so that it delivers? Yeah, you do the A/B testing to see if the flavor is right, but how do you craft that to come together? Do you hire a director, a producer, what?
I mean, yeah, there are lots of people out there that can help you put it all together. And again, the how there's no one size fits all. This is the only template to follow to make it work. Again, you'll know what works by what your audience tells you is going to work, or what you learn from them that's going to work. You'll know what sort of music is likely to instill the right emotions in them, because you'll know, okay, if they're feeling like this and I want them to feel like this by the end of this animation or video, here's the sort of music that's going to key into those emotions, and here's how I can transition that to be like this to make them feel the way I want them to feel at the end. And there's people and the experts who understand the right way to build that into your video and your animation to incorporate music. And there's plenty of services out there that have licensable music that's already created that you can drag and drop into a video file when you're putting it together, editing it, and you can mix them together and stuff. But it's the sort of thing that there's no one right way to do it. It really depends on the stage of the relationship you're at with your audience and who your audience is. And you can't just do it once and figure that it's going to be perfect forever for everyone. It's very customized, and you have to make it customized for your situation and your audience's situation.
I'm interested in your health journey. Is there a part of you that wants to go back and combine storytelling so that just champion and celebrate what the healthcare community has done and could do? That could be a very distinct market opportunity?
I'm very grateful for the research and the technology that existed when I was diagnosed, because when I got the biopsy results back, I remember I was in the ICU in Sacramento, and a doctor came in the room with the biopsy results. I remember he walked in and said, "You got the good type of cancer." And I was like, "What?" But then they explained, "Oh, we know we have a treatment planned out. You have a 90% chance of beating it, only 10% of a chance of it coming back in the first 5 years. We know how to treat this up." But one of the things they said was like, 5 years ago, we would have no idea how to treat this. We'd have been in real trouble. So there was a lot of work done to figure out how to treat this, and it's still, again, chemo and radiation. And so I'm very grateful that I got so quote unquote lucky with the type of cancer I had, because there's other types of cancer on the other end of the spectrum that's like, you got 6 months if you're lucky, and there's nothing we can do except try and slow it down. And but that sucks. So there's a lot of people working on solutions in the health tech and biotech industries to solve these problems of the type of cancers that are like, there's not much we can do. We can't really treat this stuff. Or it's the other, like Alzheimer's, dementia, and leukemia, a bunch of other really nasty conditions out there that don't have viable treatments. And there's a lot of great work being done in the startup space. But the challenge most of those startups have is they can't explain their value to people that don't already have an MD or a PhD or understand the science of the technology. They can't explain it, and they can't tell the right stories that get people to invest in them or to buy from them, and they can't market it well because they throw white papers around, or they try and feature dump about all the things that they find really exciting, and they fail to understand that their audience is not all hot and bothered by the same sort of stuff that they are. And so their endeavors kind of die on the vine because they're not able to communicate the message real well. And so I like working with those sorts of companies because I can understand what they're trying to do. I have appreciation for it. And then I can help, okay, I get what you're trying to do. Let's reframe that based on who your audience is and get them to care about it. And then that's going to start the sort of relationships you want to get your business to the next level, to accelerate that growth. Because especially if you're like in the B2B space and you're trying to get executives to pay attention to your new tech or something like that. What most startups in the health tech and med tech space are doing to show understanding of their audience and build those relationships is where I see I can add the most value with my skill set and experience. And so that sort of work is the most rewarding for me.
So, Karl, if someone is thinking about, I want to do a good story, what are the 2 to 3 key items you want to relate to them?
So every story needs to have a hero, a villain, and a guide. And so this is the story journey. Your business cannot be the hero. Business is the guide. Your audience is the hero. And there has to be a strong villain. There has to be conflict, or you don't have a story. The conflict is what gets people to feel something. If you don't get people to feel something, they're not going to act. I'll repeat it again. People don't feel something when they hear your story, they're not going to act. And so you need a strong villain, and you need to show people over the course of your story, not just that you understand how they feel now, but how you understand how they want to feel, and show them a bit story how working with you is to get them to feel the way they want to feel and overcome this villain. That understanding those aspects of your story is going to inspire way more action in people.
So at the end of the day, if someone wants to capitalize on your services, what geographic regions do you service? Middle US,
Yeah,
North America?
North America can pretty much work with anyone anywhere as long as you're able to work with the different time zone changes and stuff. But yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn. I'm only Karl Pontau, KarlPontau, floating around LinkedIn. If you want to check out my podcast, if you go to thehumanconnectionpodcast.com, you can also get in contact with me that way. And I love meeting people. And I always start relationships with potential clients by listening and understanding them and ask a lot of questions. And oftentimes we uncover that even though they're interested in working with me, they're not ready yet. They have other underlying problems first. And I'm happy and I love connecting with people in my network that can solve those problems. So even if we're not a good fit at the beginning, and I'll be the first one to say, sorry, I don't want to take your money yet because it's not going to help you as much as someone else can help you. But I'll connect you with that person. They'll get all your stuff sorted out. So when you are done with that, ready to work with me, because I definitely want to make sure it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So if you do have an idea, if you want to work with me, love to talk, but let's know that I'm not going to like pitch slap you with some sales proposition. It all starts with listening and you understand that's how you build a mutually beneficial relationship.
Thank you, Karl Pontau, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So if you have a story you want to ramp up and you're going, hi, I'm stuck, Karl's your man.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.